Another video, and we are back with the blue Miata and the partially turbo Miata, but we are working on the intercooler and intercooler piping. You can see I already had the intercooler test fitted up around where I want to ignore the teeth and the tongue, and the oil cooler. So I do have a front mount oil cooler, and I have no AC condenser, so I have no AC parts, which makes this install a lot easier. I see most people put their intercooler all the way up in the front of the bumper, but in reality, yeah, it looks awesome, but cooling wise, I think pushing it back as far as possible is going to be the best. And also, I have these huge E-fans, so it's going to suck a lot of fresh air straight through that intercooler, giving me better IETs. So before we start working on it, we have to get this bumper off, so we're just going to go ahead and... Okay, so we got the bumper off, we have our jack holding up our intercooler, and I pretty much have a plan figured out of how I'm going to go and hold this up. So when you go and remove AC, the AC condenser is held on by these brackets right here, which are actually really strong, and they're already threaded, which means I can just go ahead and chuck bolt through that, which means I can go and cut this, put it at an angle going from here to around there-ish, and then use a flat piece of steel, weld that on at an angle right there, and we'll pretty much have the perfect intercooler bracket mounts. They'll give us the perfect placement between the radiator and the intercooler, and we'll also be able to fit our oil cooler really well. So I marked these at 5.5 inches. We're going to go ahead and cut these in the cold cut saw, and then we'll start slicing them at an angle. Correction, we don't have a good enough cold cut saw blade, so we're just going to have to use a good old angle grinder. Okay, so now that we have tubing to our general length, we gotta go and actually be able to put a bolt through it and or nut on it. So we're gonna go ahead and drill this hole out. We are doing 1/2 inch by 1/2 inch, so we're just gonna go ahead and use our center punch, tap it, and then drill this out. Okay, so now we actually have a drill battery and we can drill through this now. And now we have our hole drilled in one, so we're going to go and drill our hole in the next. Okay, so now that we have our holes going through, I'm debating chopping the front part at an angle so I can actually get a socket in there instead of having the bolt stick all the way through, because I'm not going to have as much thread then. I'm only going to have about yay much thread, and this is my longest bolt. I don't feel like getting another one, and same with the nut, so I think I'm just going to go ahead and chop it at an angle, or use a bigger drill bit for the top one and make it so I can get a socket in there. So I figured out the hole is going to have to be about 5/8 of an inch, and honestly I feel like that will fit pretty well, so I guess we're going to go ahead and drill this 5/8 of an inch through. Okay, so that's 5/8, that worked pretty much perfectly. Now we can drop our bolt straight through, and then we can put a 10mm socket over that and actually go and screw it on. So we're going to go ahead and do that to the second one, and then we can go ahead and start test fitting these on the car. Okay, so that hole's drilled through, and of course our socket fits through it. So now we can actually go and bolt these up to the car. Okay, so now we're going to test fit it right up in there. That fits honestly perfect. And this other side, for some reason, doesn't have a stud. It has a threaded hole. But if we just line that up, it also fits about perfect. So we are going to go ahead and bolt them on, and then get our proper measurements so we can cut them at an angle, and then we can go and weld our flat piece of metal to it. And then we can drill through that and have our holes for our intercooler bracket. Okay, so now one bracket is longer than the other. This one is much shorter, but the brackets are the same length. It's where the brackets mount up. I think it's a little bit different. So we're going to go ahead and work on this one first, get this mount fully finished, and then we'll compensate for this side by making this one shorter. They're both 5 inches, pretty much exactly. We're going to go ahead and cut and probably tack on the tab on this side, get that bolted in, and then we'll move on to that side. And now that we already have the measurements on this side, we're gonna go ahead and take it out, cut it at that angle, and then we'll go ahead and start tacking on the piece of metal, the flat piece of metal. Okay, so now that we have our angle there, we're gonna go ahead and take this off and cut out a flat piece of metal for this. Now the said flat piece of metal we're gonna be using is some of this angle iron, and it's very oxidized. So we're gonna have to go and sand this all down, but for now, let's go ahead and just get the measurement and get it cut. So we're gonna cut about 3.5 inches off, so we're gonna cut around to that point. Let me get my Sharpie. So let's just mark that right here. And now we can whip out the angle grinder again. Now that we've been through every single angle grinder blade I have, and ended up on the smallest one because these things keep on exploding, we got our bracket cut. Okay, so we're back. We got some more angle grinder blades. We actually got a blade for the cold cut saw, and now we're gonna go ahead and grind these down so I can go ahead and tack this bracket together. So we're gonna go ahead and just put on a flat disc on the angle grinder, and then we'll tack these together, test fit them up, drill a hole, and then we'll work on the other side. Okay, so now that this is grind down and looking really good, we're simply just gonna tack that right there, just like that. Now working with this box tubing brings back some memories because the first ever welding project I did was actually with this exact thing of box tubing. So it's gonna be fun welding it to a thick piece of metal just like the first fab project. So we're gonna take our handy dandy magnet and we're simply just gonna put that there, line it up, and use our magnet to hold it together. Okay, now that that's lined up perfectly, we're going to whip out the welder and chuck a couple tacks on that. Okay, so now that we have this tack together, we're going to go ahead and test fit it on the car, figure out where we want to drill our hole, and then drill our hole and install this side of the bracket. Okay, so now that we have that bracket fitting up actually really well, we're simply just going to swing that up, get that out of the way, and put some paint marker onto the bracket for the intercooler. Now if the paint marker doesn't transfer over, you can use paint, you can use anti-seize, anything like that, just so you can know where your marking is. I'm going to try paint marker, and hopefully that will actually put the marking where I want. It may not transfer, but we're going to give it a shot. Okay, so we did get a rough marking of around where we want this. It's going to be around right there. Now I did put painter's tape on the bottom of this so I can see it a lot easier, and that paint marker can transfer over a lot easier. So now we're going to go ahead and figure out our thread size of this, because that's something I haven't done already, and then we'll go ahead and drill the corresponding hole for that. Okay, so now that we found the bolt that we want to use in our exact placement, we're going to go ahead and start drilling that out. Okay, so we're just going to figure out our drill bit size that we're going to need, and it's about a 5/8. But this one I am going to have a pilot hole, just to make sure I'm getting it as precise as possible. And of course, we got to tap our hole first. Okay, now we can up our drill bit size. Now, yes, I'm being fancy and using an Allen bolt, mostly because it's the only ones that I have that are short enough for this. The head is really small, so we are going to have to use a washer on this, but you should use a washer on just about everything. Okay, now we can test fit that again, and that fits perfect, besides the head being really small, but we're just going to go grab a washer, chuck that on, and test fit it on the car. Okay, so we have this one in on this side, and it fits awesome. I am really happy with the placement, and I'm really happy with the install of it. So now, I figured out that this bracket on this side is 1 inch lower, which means instead of this whole bracket assembly being 5 inches, it needs to be 4 inches. So we're going to pull it off, cut it to 4 inches, put our angle on it, and then weld on another tab. Okay, so now that we actually have a good blade on the cold cut saw, we can use it to get straight cuts. If you can't tell, I don't like using the angle grinder. Using the proper tools is amazing. Look at that perfectly straight cut. Now I can just pull this out and figure out where we want this. Now that we have our marking all the way around, we're just gonna adjust this and get that cut in, and then we'll weld on the bracket. Okay, so we have our adjustment maxed out, and then we have a random piece of piping just as a shim, and it pretty much lines up perfectly, so let's go ahead and cut this. Okay, we have our bracket. We're gonna let that cool down, and then we'll test fit it in the car. Okay, we're gonna chop off some more of this angle iron, because we got this side done. So then we're just gonna go ahead and grind them all down and tack them together. Okay, we got our next piece, and now we're gonna go ahead and test fit it in the car and then tack it to our box tubing. Okay, so now that we have this all cut up and marked up where we want, we're going to go ahead and tack it on. Okay, so now we have it all tacked up. We are going to let it cool down because I'm impatient and never let it cool down and always burn myself. So I'm going to try to be a little bit responsible and let it cool down before actually putting it on. So I test fitted it on the car and figured out what point we need to go ahead and drill this hole. I got that now, so we're going to tap it and then we'll drill it. Okay, so now we're going to test fit this in the car, make sure the intercooler is pretty strong, and then we'll go ahead and start taking off some material, make them look a little bit nicer, and then we'll chuck some paint on them. So we got them both done, and this one is about an inch longer because the simple factor of the mounting point on the car is an inch higher on this one than it is on this side, which means this plate sticks out a little bit more, so we're just going to cut this off and then we'll weld them fully out. So you can see our intercooler brackets are done, and again, they're on the same brackets that the AC condenser stays off of, and we have about, I think it's 1 1/4 inch clearance between the radiator and the intercooler, and then we have another like about 2 inches between the oil cooler and the intercooler, which means we're going to have plenty of space between them. They're not going to hit together, but they're also close enough where these massive E-fans will actually suck air through them, getting better IETs. I see people put their intercoolers all the way up here, but after that air goes through them, then it can go back down and under the radiator. Having them all close, tucked together really well helps a lot. But I'm going to go ahead and call it a video here, so come back for the next video where we go over making intercooler piping, which I'm actually going to start on now. But if you guys have enjoyed this video or learned anything from it, like, subscribe, all that good stuff. I hope you guys have a great day. See you guys all next time. Peace out.